The town of Riverdale sat nestled against the Chesapeake Bay, a community built on generations of naval tradition. American flags adorned front porches year-round, and the local high school's football stadium overlooked the naval base that had defined the town's economy and culture for decades. It was the kind of place where young men grew up knowing their futures might include uniforms and service, where families spoke of deployments and homecomings with the same casual certainty that others discussed weather and sports seasons. For Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes, Riverdale had always been home, even during her 8 years of naval service. Now, at 32, she had returned to face the most demanding challenge of her career, becoming one of the first female candidates to attempt the Navy's elite special warfare training program. The recent policy change allowing women to try for special operations roles had created both opportunity and scrutiny, and Rebecca felt the weight of both as she drove through the familiar streets of her hometown. Her small apartment near the base was sparsely furnished. Military life had taught her to travel light and value function over comfort. The only decorations were family photos and her framed Naval Academy diploma. Rebecca stood at her kitchen counter, reviewing the training schedule that would begin at 500 the next morning. The paper felt heavy in her hands, each printed line representing obstacles both physical and cultural that she would need to overcome. The phone's ring interrupted her thoughts. The caller ID showed Dad, and Rebecca felt a familiar blend of love and tension. Captain James Hayes, USN, retired, had served 30 years in naval special warfare. His response to her decision to pursue the same path had been complicated, pride mixed with concern, support tempered by decades of seeing the brutal training firsthand. "Hey, Dad," she answered, her voice deliberately casual. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked, skipping the pleasantries in typical military fashion. "As ready as I can be. Just finished my final prep workout and going over the schedule now." There was a brief pause. "They're going to test you harder than the others, Becca, not just physically." "I know." She had grown up hearing his stories, understanding both the spoken and unspoken realities of elite military units. "That's been the case my entire career." "Different level now, these instructors. Many of them don't believe women should be there at all. They won't say it publicly, but they'll look for any reason to wash you out." Rebecca pressed her lips together, suppressing the urge to remind him this wasn't news to her. "Then I'll just have to give them no reasons." Her father's sigh carried years of experience. "It's not that simple, and you know it. There are 24 men in your training cohort. Most will fail. The instructors expect that. But if you fail, it won't just be Rebecca Hayes washing out to them. It will validate their belief that the entire program should remain male-only." "So no pressure," she replied with a dry laugh. "Just be prepared. The physical challenges are only part of it. It's the mental game that breaks most candidates." After ending the call, Rebecca stood by her window, looking out toward the bay where naval vessels occasionally passed. Her father's concerns weren't unfounded. Throughout her career, from the Naval Academy through her service as a surface warfare officer, she had faced the double standard. Success was attributed to special treatment. Failures became evidence that women didn't belong. Her decision to attempt special warfare training hadn't come lightly. At 32, she was older than most candidates. Her background in surface warfare rather than traditional SEAL feeder communities like explosive ordnance disposal made her even more of an outsider. But after multiple deployments and increasing specialization in maritime security operations, Rebecca had proven herself in ways that earned her this rare opportunity. Morning came too quickly. Rebecca rose at 3:30, giving herself time for the preparation rituals that had become second nature. A carefully balanced meal, mobility exercises, mental rehearsal of the day ahead. She arrived at the training facility at 4:45, 15 minutes early, to find several other candidates already there. Most avoided eye contact, either from pre-training focus or discomfort with her presence. Commander David Blackwood arrived precisely at 500. At 45, he had the weathered appearance of someone who had spent decades in harsh environments, his face etched with lines that spoke of both sun exposure and the weight of command decisions. As the lead instructor and a legendary figure in naval special warfare, his opinion would matter more than most in determining who made it through the program. "Gentlemen," he began, his eyes briefly pausing on Rebecca before continuing, "and Lieutenant Hayes, welcome to Special Warfare Assessment and Selection. Over the next 12 weeks, we will determine which of you have what it takes to continue to the full qualification training. He paced before them, hands clasped behind his back. The standards are non-negotiable. They exist because the missions demand them. You will be tested beyond what you believe you're capable of. Most of you will fail. That's not an insult, it's statistical reality. Blackwood stopped directly in front of Rebecca. Lieutenant Hayes, you are attempting something no woman has completed before. The standards will not be adjusted. Is that understood? Yes, sir, she replied, meeting his gaze directly. I expect no special treatment. Good, he nodded, because you'll receive none. The first day's physical screening began immediately, a punishing series of timed exercises designed to weed out those who hadn't prepared adequately. Rebecca had trained intensively for months, focusing on the areas where women typically faced biological disadvantages, upper body strength, particularly pulling movements that would be crucial for maritime operations. The swim test came first, a 500-meter side stroke in full uniform. Rebecca completed it within the required time, though several male candidates finished well ahead of her. The pull-ups followed, where the minimum standard was 15 consecutive repetitions. She managed 17, exceeding the requirement but still placing in the bottom quartile of the group. As the morning progressed through push-ups, sit-ups, and a 4-mile run in boots, Rebecca maintained her position, always passing but rarely excelling. By noon, 3 candidates had already failed to meet minimum standards and were dismissed. The remaining candidates moved to the obstacle course, a complex arrangement of walls, ropes, and balance challenges. Here, Rebecca's smaller frame became a disadvantage. The 8-foot wall, easily scaled by most of her male counterparts who could reach the top edge with a jump, required her to use the rope assist, costing precious seconds. By the time she completed the course, her time placed her second to last among those who finished. Commander Blackwood observed without comment, making notes on his clipboard as candidates completed each element. His expression revealed nothing, but Rebecca felt the weight of his assessment. This was just the screening phase, designed to eliminate the obviously unprepared. The real challenges would begin tomorrow. That evening, returning to her apartment exhausted but satisfied at having survived day 1, Rebecca found a text message from her father. First day always looks for the easy cuts. Tomorrow the real test begins. She sank into her couch, muscles aching from the day's exertion. Her father was right. She had passed the basic entrance requirements, but that was expected. She hadn't distinguished herself. In a program where excellence was the minimum standard, merely adequate performance wouldn't be enough. As she prepared for bed, setting her alarm for another pre-dawn wake-up, Rebecca considered the challenges ahead. The physical demands would increase dramatically. But more concerning were the tactical drills beginning tomorrow, complex scenarios requiring not just strength and endurance but leadership, decision-making under pressure, and seamless teamwork with men who might not want her there at all. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Commander Blackwood's assessing gaze. In his eyes, she had seen neither hostility nor encouragement, only clinical evaluation. He would be fair, she believed, but utterly uncompromising. In a program where most candidates failed, she would need to find advantages where she could create them and overcome disadvantages that couldn't be changed. What Rebecca didn't yet realize was how soon those challenges would test her to her breaking point, or how unexpected the source of her eventual breakthrough would be. The journey that would define her career and potentially change the future of women in special warfare was just beginning, with obstacles more daunting than any physical barrier on the training course. Dawn broke over the training facility with a light rain that turned the sandy ground into a clinging mud. Rebecca arrived to find the other candidates already formed up in their assigned squads, their faces showing the fatigue of yesterday's exertions, but set with determination for what lay ahead. She quickly took her place in the 3rd squad, ignoring the sidelong glances from a few of her teammates. Commander Blackwood emerged from the instruction building, accompanied by 4 other instructors, all men with the unmistakable bearing of experienced operators. Today we begin tactical assessment, he announced without preamble. You'll rotate through 5 stations: small unit movement, breach and clear, casualty extraction, maritime infiltration, and command decision scenarios. Your performance will be evaluated both individually and as part of your team. He paused, scanning the assembled candidates. These exercises replicate the complex situations our operators face in the field. Physical capability is just the foundation. Now we need to see if you can think, lead, and function as part of a coordinated unit under pressure. Rebecca's squad began at the small unit movement station, where they would need to navigate a simulated hostile territory while maintaining proper formation and communication. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the instructor for this station, explained the parameters. You'll move from Point Alpha to Point Delta, approximately 2 kilometers through varied terrain. You'll encounter opposition forces and must respond according to standard protocols. Lieutenant Adams will serve as squad leader for this exercise. Adams, a muscular former college football player with 5 years of service in explosive ordnance disposal, nodded confidently. Rebecca had interacted briefly with him during yesterday's physical screening. He had been professionally cordial but distant. "Equipment check and then move out in 3 minutes," Jackson ordered. As they prepared, Adams quickly assigned positions. Mitchell and Santiago on point, Hayes and Cooper providing rear security, the rest of you in standard formation. Remember, this is about smooth movement and proper response, not just speed. Rebecca acknowledged her assignment without comment, though being placed in rear security, often considered the least critical position, felt deliberate. She would have the least opportunity to demonstrate leadership or decision-making skills. The exercise began, and the squad moved efficiently through the wooded course. 20 minutes in, they encountered their first opposition, instructors playing the role of hostile forces. Adams signaled for the squad to take cover, then coordinated a textbook response that neutralized the threat. Rebecca performed her assigned role competently, but had no opportunity to distinguish herself. As they approached the halfway point, an unexpected scenario developed. One of the instructors triggered a simulated IED, injuring Adams and Santiago. With the squad leader down, command automatically transferred to the next most senior member, which happened to be Rebecca. "Adams and Santiago are down," called the instructor. "Lieutenant Hayes has command. Situation requires immediate decision, continue mission or extract casualties." All eyes turned to Rebecca. This was clearly a test of her leadership and decision-making ability under pressure. The right answer wasn't obvious. Both mission completion and casualty care were critical priorities in real operations. "Cooper and Jensen, establish security perimeter," she ordered without hesitation. "Mitchell, begin casualty assessment. Parker, maintain communication with headquarters. We'll stabilize casualties before determining next steps." She moved quickly to assess the tactical situation, weighing options based on the information available. After ensuring the wounded were stable, she made her decision. "We'll split the squad. Mitchell and Jensen will continue to objective with reduced profile. Cooper, Parker, and I will extract casualties back to starting point. Maintain communication throughout." Lieutenant Commander Jackson observed with an impassive expression as Rebecca organized the extraction. When the exercise concluded an hour later, he offered only minimal feedback. "Unconventional solution. Splitting forces creates vulnerability." Rebecca nodded, accepting the critique while standing by her decision. "Given the constraints, sir, I prioritized both mission continuation and casualty care." In real operations, Lieutenant, there are rarely perfect solutions, only trade-offs with consequences. The day continued through the remaining stations, with Rebecca's performance following a troubling pattern. In technically precise exercises like the maritime infiltration, where procedures had clear parameters, she performed adequately. But in scenarios requiring adaptive leadership or physical power, she struggled. The breach and clear exercise proved particularly challenging. Each candidate took turns leading a 4-person element to breach a door and secure a room containing both hostiles and civilians. When Rebecca's turn came, her approach was methodical and by the book. "Standard stack formation," she ordered. "I'll take point, Rivera on breach, Mitchell and Cooper follow and split to secure corners." The exercise began smoothly, the door was breached, and Rebecca led the entry. But as they moved into the room, one of the instructors playing a hostile made an unexpected move, changing the dynamics of the scenario. Rebecca hesitated momentarily before responding, a delay that in a real operation could prove fatal. "Exercise failed," called out the instructor. Hayes, an entire element, considered casualties due to inadequate room clearing. Rebecca's face remained professionally neutral, though the failure stung sharply. She had studied room-clearing procedures extensively, but the difference between theoretical knowledge and the split-second decision-making required in execution had become painfully clear. The final station of the day, the command decision scenario, presented a complex simulation where candidates were given limited information and required to develop an operational plan under severe time constraints. Rebecca's plan was technically sound, but considered overly cautious by the evaluating instructor. "Your plan prioritizes risk mitigation over mission accomplishment," Commander Blackwood himself commented after reviewing her work. "While thoroughness has its place, hesitation and excessive caution can be just as dangerous as recklessness." By day's end, Rebecca knew her performance had been mediocre at best. While she hadn't failed outright like 3 more candidates who were dismissed that day, she was clearly struggling to distinguish herself in the areas that mattered most to the evaluators. In the locker room afterward, she overheard a conversation between 2 of her squad mates that confirmed her concerns. "Hayes is technically competent, but she lacks the aggressive edge," one commented quietly. "Too much thinking, not enough action." "She'll wash out in the field exercises next week," the other replied. "No way she'll handle the extended physical stress combined with tactical decision-making." Rebecca closed her locker with deliberate calm and left without acknowledging that she had heard them. Their assessment wasn't entirely wrong. She had approached today's exercises with an analytical mindset that had served her well in her previous roles, but seemed inadequate here. That evening, she reviewed her performance with brutal honesty. The physical challenges were difficult but manageable with her preparation. The tactical and leadership components, however, revealed a gap between her capabilities and what the program demanded. She was applying surface warfare approaches to special warfare scenarios, methodical, protocol-driven, and risk-averse rather than adaptive and decisive. As she prepared for the next day's challenges, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How's it going?" Rebecca stared at the simple question, uncertain how to respond. Finally, she typed, "Struggling with tactical exercises, physical okay but not standing out." His reply came quickly. "They're looking for those who excel, not those who survive. Find your edge." The advice was typical of her father, direct and uncompromising, but not particularly helpful in practical terms. What was her edge? What unique quality could she bring that would compensate for the biological disadvantages she faced in a program designed around male physical capabilities? These questions followed her into restless sleep, her mind replaying the day's failures even as her body tried to recover for tomorrow's challenges. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain. If something didn't change quickly, her opportunity to make history would end in just another statistic, another female candidate who couldn't meet the standard. What Rebecca couldn't know was that Commander Blackwood had been watching her more closely than she realized. Behind his impassive exterior, he was noting patterns in her performance that would soon lead to an intervention, one that would change her trajectory in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. The 3rd week of training brought the dreaded land warfare exercise, 5 days of continuous operations with minimal sleep, constant movement, and increasingly complex tactical scenarios. It was here, historically, that the majority of remaining candidates reached their breaking points, with mental fatigue compounding physical exhaustion to expose fundamental weaknesses. Rebecca's squad had been reduced to 6 members after additional cuts the previous week. She had survived by maintaining adequate performance, but the gap between adequate and exceptional remained concerning. Commander Blackwood had made few direct comments about her performance, but his note-taking during her exercises had grown more frequent, never a good sign. "Listen up," Blackwood addressed the remaining 18 candidates as they prepared for the land warfare phase. "This exercise simulates an extended operation in hostile territory. You'll be given mission objectives requiring intelligence gathering, strategic movement, and direct action components. You'll operate with minimal support and must make decisions with incomplete information, just like real-world scenarios." He paced before them, his weathered face showing no fatigue despite the pre-dawn hour. "Sleep deprivation and physical strain will affect your judgment. The strong become weak, and the weak break. This is where we learn who you really are beneath the surface." The candidates were divided into 3 operational teams, with Rebecca assigned to Alpha Team under the leadership of Lieutenant Rodriguez, a former scout sniper with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Their first mission brief came immediately. They would infiltrate a simulated insurgent compound to retrieve intelligence materials while avoiding detection if possible. Rodriguez gathered his team for planning. We'll approach from the eastern perimeter where vegetation provides cover. Hayes and Mitchell on security, Cooper and I will enter the structure. Jensen and Rivera establish overwatch positions to monitor potential hostile movement. Rebecca noted her assignment to the security element, another support role rather than direct action. The pattern had become familiar over the weeks of training. While not explicitly stated, it was clear that Rodriguez and others didn't fully trust her in critical positions. She had done nothing to prove them wrong, maintaining competent but unremarkable performance. The mission began at nightfall, with the team moving silently through densely wooded terrain toward the objective. They successfully reached the observation point without detection, and Rodriguez conducted final preparations for the compound infiltration. Hayes, Mitchell maintain position here and secure our exfil route. If anything changes, 3 clicks on the radio. No unnecessary communication. Rebecca acknowledged the order and took her position, watching as Rodriguez and Cooper disappeared toward the compound. For 45 minutes, she maintained vigilant observation, monitoring potential approach routes while Mitchell covered the opposite sector. Then came the unexpected variable, a patrol of enemy combatants. Instructors playing opposition forces approached from a direction that would intersect directly with Rodriguez and Cooper's planned extraction route. They were too far away for radio communication without breaking noise discipline, and the patrol would reach the critical junction before the infiltration team returned. Rebecca faced a decision point: maintain her assigned position as ordered or adapt to the changing situation. After a moment's calculation, she made her choice. "Mitchell, maintain this position," she whispered. "I'm going to create a diversion to draw the patrol away from the extraction route." Before he could object, she moved quickly through the underbrush, circling wide to approach the patrol from their flank. Using techniques from the evasion training module, she deliberately created enough noise to attract attention without revealing her position, then led the patrol on a circuitous route away from both the compound and the planned extraction path. The gambit worked. The patrol pursued the disturbance, allowing Rodriguez and Cooper to complete their mission and extract safely. But when the team reconvened at the rally point, Rodriguez was furious. "You abandoned your post without authorization," he hissed once the exercise was called complete. "That's a direct violation of the mission plan." "The situation changed," Rebecca replied calmly. "The patrol would have intercepted you at the junction. There wasn't time for communication without compromising your position." "That wasn't your call to make, Lieutenant. You had specific orders." Before Rebecca could respond, Commander Blackwood approached, having observed the entire scenario unfold. "Interesting adaptation, Lieutenant Hayes. Walk with me." As they moved away from the group, Rebecca prepared for disciplinary action. Instead, Blackwood asked, "Why did you leave your position?" "I identified an immediate threat to the mission that wasn't visible when the original orders were given, sir. The patrol's trajectory would have directly intercepted the extraction team with high probability of compromise. I calculated that creating a diversion presented the best chance of mission success, even though it meant disobeying a direct order." Rebecca met his gaze. "In special operations, sir, I understand that mission accomplishment sometimes requires initiative and adaptation rather than rigid adherence to initial plans when conditions change." Blackwood studied her for a moment. "You've been holding back, Lieutenant, playing it safe, following procedures rather than trusting your instincts." It wasn't a question, but an observation. "I've been trying to execute as instructed, sir." "And that's precisely your problem." For the first time, Blackwood's tone carried something beyond professional assessment, a hint of insight, perhaps even frustration. "You're approaching this training as if it's an exam with correct answers rather than a dynamic environment requiring adaptive leadership." The observation struck Rebecca with unexpected force. Throughout her career, precision and adherence to protocol had been rewarded. The naval culture she knew valued procedural discipline above all. But special warfare operated under different principles, where rigid conformity could be a liability rather than a strength. "Tonight's action was your first genuine display of the qualities we actually look for," Blackwood continued. "Not perfect execution of predetermined plans, but appropriate adaptation to changing circumstances with mission success as the priority. He paused, looking out over the training ground before turning back to her. Stop trying to be what you think we want. Start being the officer you actually are. The words were simple but profound, a directive that seemed to cut through weeks of struggling to fit herself into a mold that perhaps wasn't right to begin with. Yes, sir, she replied, understanding flowing through her tired mind like a sudden current of clarity. The remaining days of the land warfare exercise brought new challenges, but Rebecca approached them with a fundamentally different mindset. Rather than focusing on textbook execution, she began trusting her instincts and unique perspectives, often seeing options that others missed precisely because she approached problems differently. During an ambush scenario on the fourth day, when the team was pinned down by simulated enemy fire, she identified a drainage culvert that others had overlooked, a potential flanking route too small for most of her male counterparts, but navigable for her smaller frame. Rodriguez, if you lay suppressive fire on their left position, I can move through that drainage pipe and flank their right side, she suggested, no longer hesitating to offer alternative approaches. Rodriguez, having witnessed her increasing contributions over the previous days, considered the option and nodded. Make it happen, Hayes. The maneuver succeeded, allowing Rebecca to neutralize two opposition forces from an unexpected angle and create an extraction opportunity for the team. For the first time, she had contributed a unique solution based on an advantage rather than overcoming a disadvantage. By the final day of the land warfare phase, the dynamic within the team had shifted noticeably. Rebecca was no longer relegated to support roles, but integrated into critical elements of mission planning and execution. Her suggestions were considered on their merits rather than automatically discounted. When the candidates returned to base, exhausted but triumphant at having completed one of the most demanding phases of the training, the instructors gathered them for evaluation. 3 more candidates have been dropped from the program, Blackwood announced. The rest of you have demonstrated the basic resilience required to continue, but now the standards increase again. Physical recovery today, tomorrow we begin maritime operations. As the group dispersed, Blackwood approached Rebecca. Lieutenant Hayes, your performance improved significantly during this phase. Thank you, sir. I've been trying to apply your guidance. He nodded, 2 words that made all the difference, it seems. Continue on this trajectory, and you have a legitimate chance at completing the program. Those 2 words, stop trying, had indeed been transformative, though not in the way most would interpret them. For Rebecca, they had granted permission to abandon her attempt to conform to an imagined ideal and instead bring her authentic strengths to the challenges ahead. As she headed for a desperately needed shower and meal, Rebecca noticed a new regard in the eyes of her fellow candidates. Not universal acceptance, perhaps, but a growing recognition that she brought valuable capabilities to the team. The change had begun not when she finally mastered the physical challenges, but when she stopped apologizing for her differences and started leveraging them. That evening, she called her father for the first time since training began. You sound different, he noted immediately, more confident. I am, she acknowledged. I've stopped trying to be one of the guys and started figuring out how to be effective as myself. There was a moment of silence before he responded. That's exactly what I hoped would happen. The program doesn't need carbon copies, it needs diverse capabilities. The conversation continued, more open and honest than their exchanges had been in years. For the first time, her father shared stories not of his successes, but of his own struggles during training, the moments of doubt and the mentors who had helped him find his way. As Rebecca prepared for the maritime phase to begin the next day, she realized that a fundamental shift had occurred, not just in how others perceived her, but in how she saw herself within the program. The question was no longer whether a woman could complete special warfare training, but whether this particular officer had the unique combination of attributes required for success. What she couldn't know was that the most demanding tests still lay ahead, and that Commander Blackwood's interest in her progress stemmed from more than just professional curiosity. The maritime phase would push her to new limits, testing whether her newfound approach could withstand the most physically demanding challenges the program had to offer. The maritime phase began with a pre-dawn gathering at the waterfront training facility. Fog hung over the Chesapeake Bay, obscuring the distance and creating an otherworldly atmosphere as the remaining 15 candidates assembled in their wetsuits. The water temperature was a chilly 58 degrees, cold enough to sap energy and cloud judgment over extended exposure. Commander Blackwood stood before them, his presence somehow more imposing in this environment. The maritime component separates those who belong in naval special warfare from those who simply possess general military competence, he began. Water is the great equalizer, unforgiving of mistakes, demanding respect rather than dominance. Your relationship with the water defines your potential as an operator. Rebecca listened intently, aware that this phase would test her in new ways. The physical demands would be extreme, but she now understood that the mental component, how she approached each challenge, would ultimately determine her success. Today begins with basic maritime competence assessment, Blackwood continued. You'll complete a series of water confidence drills, equipment management exercises, and team movement scenarios. This afternoon, we move to small craft operations. The first exercise, underwater gear retrieval, required candidates to dive to the bottom of the training pool, approximately 15 feet deep, to recover pieces of equipment while wearing full combat gear. The weight made positive buoyancy impossible, requiring controlled descent and ascent while managing limited breath capacity. As Rebecca waited her turn, she observed the others' approaches. Most used powerful kicks to descend quickly, grabbed the equipment, and then fought their way back to the surface, a brute force method that consumed enormous energy and oxygen. When her turn came, Rebecca employed a different strategy. Rather than fighting against her natural buoyancy, she exhaled completely to begin her descent, used minimal movement to conserve oxygen, and allowed physics to work in her favor during the ascent phase by dropping her weight belt at the appropriate moment. Efficient technique, Lieutenant Hayes, noted Lieutenant Commander Jackson, who was evaluating this station. Different from standard approach, but effective. Thank you, sir, Rebecca replied, recognizing that weeks earlier, she might have taken his observation as criticism rather than acknowledgement of valid alternative methodology. The morning progressed through increasingly challenging water exercises, underwater knot tying, buddy breathing, simulated equipment failures, and extraction of incapacitated team members. Rebecca maintained solid performance throughout, neither excelling dramatically nor falling behind. The afternoon transition to small craft operations brought new dimensions to the training. Teams of 3 were assigned to rigid hull inflatable boats, RHIBs, for navigation exercises in the bay. Rebecca's team included Cooper, who had gradually shifted from skepticism to professional respect over the previous weeks, and Rivera, a quiet but highly competent candidate with previous maritime experience. Their first mission involved navigating a complex route using only compass and charts, no GPS or electronic aids, while avoiding instructor boats playing the role of hostile vessels. Each team member would rotate through the roles of navigator, boat handler, and observer. Rivera took the first navigation leg, guiding them expertly through the initial portion of the course. Cooper handled the second leg competently, though a minor calculation error required course correction midway. When Rebecca's turn came, conditions had deteriorated, the wind had increased, creating choppy water conditions, and visibility was reduced by encroaching evening fog. Course heading 57 degrees, she directed Cooper, who was now handling the boat. We'll parallel the shipping channel for 2 kilometers, then cut across at the marker buoy. Her navigation was precise, but as they approached the critical turning point, they spotted an instructor boat directly in their planned path. Traditional protocol would suggest altering course to avoid contact, the safe and conservative approach. But Rebecca saw an opportunity. Maintain course but reduce speed, she instructed. The fog bank ahead gives us cover if we can reach it before they spot us. Cooper hesitated momentarily, then complied. The RHIB slipped into the fog bank just as the instructor boat turned in their direction, effectively vanishing from visual detection. Rebecca then guided them through a series of minor course adjustments that kept them concealed while still progressing toward their objective. Unorthodox but effective, Cooper commented quietly as they successfully reached the extraction point ahead of the other teams. I would have gone around the long way. Sometimes the obvious solution isn't optimal, Rebecca replied. The fog was a tactical advantage if used correctly. As they secured the boat, Commander Blackwood approached, having monitored their progress from a separate vessel. Interesting navigation choices, Lieutenant Hayes. Most candidates prioritize avoiding detection through distance rather than concealment. The longer route would have exposed us to multiple potential intercept points, sir. The fog offered better probability of mission success despite the closer proximity to the opposition force. Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but Rebecca caught a glint of approval in his eyes. Risk assessment isn't about avoiding all risk, it's about choosing which risks offer the best chance of mission accomplishment. Well reasoned. The following days brought escalating challenges: night navigation, underwater infiltration exercises, ship boarding simulations, and extended maritime movement while sleep-deprived. The candidates were pushed to their physical and mental limits, with 3 more washing out after failing to meet minimum standards. Rebecca found herself not just surviving but occasionally thriving. Her different physical attributes, smaller size, lower center of gravity, more efficient oxygen utilization, sometimes offered advantages in the maritime environment that offset disadvantages in raw strength. More importantly, her willingness to develop unconventional approaches to standard problems frequently yielded unexpected successes. The culminating maritime exercise began on the 5th day, a 36-hour continuous operation requiring infiltration to an enemy-held island, intelligence gathering, and extraction under opposition pressure. The remaining 12 candidates were formed into 3 4-person teams, with Rebecca assigned as team leader for Bravo Team. Your objective is to infiltrate the eastern shore of the island using underwater approach, locate the communication center, gather specified intelligence, and extract via the western beach where recovery boats will be waiting, Blackwood explained during the briefing. You'll face active opposition, difficult environmental conditions, and equipment challenges. This is as close to a real-world operation as training gets. As Rebecca's team prepared their gear, checking rebreathers for the underwater approach, and ensuring communication equipment was waterproofed, she gathered them for final coordination. Standard approach protocols will be modified, she began, outlining her plan. Instead of the typical direct eastern approach, we'll circle north where currents are stronger but patrols are lighter. It adds swimming distance but reduces exposure time on the beach. Cooper, now her second in command for this exercise, nodded in agreement. Satellite imagery shows heavier vegetation coverage on the north side too, better concealment once we're ashore. The operation began at dusk, with the teams departing the launch vessel at staggered intervals. Rebecca's team entered the water last, beginning the grueling swim toward their modified approach point. The rebreathers eliminated telltale bubbles but added bulk and complexity to their movement. 2 hours later, exhausted but undetected, they reached the northern shore of the island. After quickly concealing their water gear, the team began their cautious movement toward the objective, using the dense vegetation for cover. Rebecca's navigation kept them oriented despite the darkness and unfamiliar terrain. They reached the vicinity of the communication center shortly after midnight, establishing an observation position to study patrol patterns and security measures. After 30 minutes of reconnaissance, Rebecca gathered her team for planning. 2 guards at the main entrance, periodic patrols at 15-minute intervals, and what appears to be motion detection equipment on the western approaches, she summarized. Standard infiltration would suggest waiting for the guard change at 200, but I'm proposing an alternative. She outlined her approach, using the building's drainage system to access a maintenance entrance on the eastern side, bypassing most of the security measures. The pipe was small, barely large enough for a person to navigate, but offered a direct path to their objective with minimal exposure. I'll make the initial entry, Rebecca continued. Once I confirm it's clear, Cooper will follow with the technical equipment for intelligence gathering. Rivera and Mitchell maintain security positions and prepare our extraction route. Cooper raised the obvious concern. That pipe looks barely navigable even for someone of your size if you get stuck halfway. Then you'll have to pull me out by my feet, she replied with a grim smile. But I won't get stuck. The plan proceeded, with Rebecca removing her bulkier equipment and sliding into the drainage pipe with only essential gear. The confined space was challenging, requiring her to use core muscles rather than limbs to propel herself forward in the slimy concrete tube. After 15 agonizing minutes, she reached the interior access point, a maintenance grate leading into the facility's utility room. Once inside, she signaled Cooper to follow, and together they moved through the darkened building to the communication center. While Cooper accessed the target computer systems, Rebecca maintained security, alert for any sign of detection. "Data acquired," Cooper whispered after 10 tense minutes. "Complete intelligence package." They retraced their route, rejoining Rivera and Mitchell at the perimeter, then began their movement toward the extraction point on the western beach. Halfway there, disaster struck. They encountered an instructor patrol that had deviated from the expected patterns. "Down," Rebecca hissed as the patrol's flashlight beams cut through the darkness ahead of them. There was no time to retreat, and the open ground offered minimal concealment. In a split-second decision, she implemented a diversion tactic rarely used in training scenarios. "Cooper, take the intelligence package and continue to the extraction point with Mitchell. Rivera and I will create a diversion to draw them away, then circle back for secondary extraction." Cooper hesitated only momentarily before nodding. The team split, with Rebecca and Rivera deliberately creating noise to attract the patrol's attention while moving away from Cooper and Mitchell's route to the extraction point. The gambit worked. The patrol pursued Rebecca and Rivera, allowing the intelligence package to reach the extraction point. But now Rebecca faced a new problem, reaching their own extraction before the exercise time limit expired. After successfully evading the patrol, she and Rivera found themselves on the southeastern portion of the island, far from their planned extraction point, and with less than an hour before deadline. "We won't make the western beach in time," Rivera noted, checking his watch. "Not on foot." Rebecca studied their position on the map, identifying an alternative. "We're not going back on foot. See that boathouse? We're going to borrow transportation." Using techniques from earlier maritime training, they quietly appropriated a small maintenance skiff from the boathouse and navigated around the island's perimeter, reaching the extraction point with minutes to spare. As they approached the recovery boat, Rebecca could see Commander Blackwood waiting, his expression inscrutable in the pre-dawn light. "Unorthodox extraction method, Lieutenant Hayes," he noted as they climbed aboard, "though effective." "Adaptation to circumstances, sir," she replied, the exhaustion of 36 continuous hours of operation evident in her voice despite her professional demeanor. The intelligence package was the priority. "And your decision to split your team." "Calculated risk based on resource prioritization. The intelligence was more important than any individual team member." Blackwood nodded slowly, the correct assessment, though not one every team leader made. Back at base, as the candidates recovered from the grueling exercise, word spread that only 9 of the original 25 remained in contention for program completion. Rebecca was among them, the only woman to have reached this final phase of selection. 2 days later, Blackwood gathered the remaining candidates for the announcement of final assessments. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Even reaching this point represented significant achievement, but the ultimate goal remained uncertain. "The selection board has reviewed all performance metrics, instructor evaluations, and specific mission outcomes," Blackwood began. 7 candidates have demonstrated the necessary qualities for advancement to the qualification training phase. He began reading names, each candidate stepping forward upon being called. Cooper's name came forth, his face showing restrained satisfaction at the accomplishment. After the 6th name, Rebecca remained standing with 2 others, her expression carefully neutral despite the tension building within her. A long pause followed before Blackwood spoke again. "Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes." She stepped forward, maintaining military bearing despite the momentous significance of the moment. She would be the first woman to advance to full special warfare qualification training. After the formal proceedings concluded, the successful candidates received congratulations from instructors and fellow trainees. As the group dispersed, Commander Blackwood approached Rebecca. "A moment, Lieutenant Hayes." They walked a short distance from the others, stopping near the waterfront where the program had begun weeks earlier. The morning sun reflected off the bay, a stark contrast to the foggy morning of the maritime phase. "When you arrived at this program," Blackwood said, looking out over the water, "I had significant doubts about whether any female candidate could succeed. not because of physical limitations, but because decades of tradition and training methodology have been built around male operators. He turned to face her directly. You've demonstrated something important. That different doesn't mean inferior, and that tactical diversity can be an asset rather than a liability. Thank you, sir, Rebecca replied, somewhat taken aback by the unprecedented candor. Do you know why those two words made such a difference in your performance? He asked. She considered carefully before answering. They gave me permission to stop trying to be something I'm not, to stop attempting to match others' strengths, and instead develop approaches based on my own capabilities. Blackwood nodded. Precisely. Stop trying wasn't about reducing effort, it was about authenticity. The program doesn't need candidates who can perfectly replicate what we already have. It needs operators who bring new perspectives and alternative solutions. He extended his hand. Congratulations, Lieutenant Hayes. You've earned your place, and in doing so, you've made this program stronger. As they shook hands, Rebecca recognized that her accomplishment extended beyond personal achievement. She had opened a door that would allow future female candidates to be evaluated on their actual capabilities rather than preconceptions. Later that day, as she packed her gear for transfer to the qualification training facility, Rebecca found a note that had been slipped under her door. The handwriting was her father's, but the message surprised her. I knew you could do it, not because you're my daughter, but because 30 years ago, a young lieutenant named David Blackwood saved my life in an operation gone wrong. He used an approach no one else would have considered, because he thought differently than the rest of us. When I heard he was leading your selection program, I knew you'd find your way. Proud of you, Becca. You've earned this on your own terms. The note revealed a connection she had never suspected. That Blackwood's interest in her progress had been more personal than she realized. Yet he had never shown her favoritism. If anything, his standards for her performance had been higher than for others. As Rebecca prepared to begin the next phase of her journey, she reflected on the transformation of the past weeks. She had arrived trying to prove that a woman could succeed in a man's world by becoming as much like them as possible. She would continue forward having demonstrated something far more valuable. That diversity of thought, approach, and capability represented strength rather than weakness in elite military units. Those two words, stop trying, had changed everything, not by lowering standards, but by allowing her to discover her authentic path to meeting them. In doing so, she had not only changed her own future, but potentially the future of naval special warfare itself.